Welcome back, friends and family, to another Bad Dinner Guest Bible study. Tonight, I am Kev, as every night, and I have with me RJ. We're going to be reading Genesis 5. This is the book of the generations of Adam. Those are not my words. That's the first part of it. Those of you watching along on YouTube will be able to read along. So if you're listening on Soundcloud and want to be able to fact check us on the spot, we'll be reading the King James Version. And we also have a hard copy here to double check any spelling errors or anything. I want to also refer you back to our first episode for our long disclosure as far as what we're trying to do here. But broad strokes is this is an objective Bible study. We are reading it. We're going to stop at any point in time to discuss anything that anything that verse brings to mind. And with that, RJ, do you have anything you'd like to add to the disclosure?
Hey, what's up, guys? I'm here with Kevin. Nope, I don't really have anything else to bring to it other than that I'm also in the room and going to be reading with y'all. Definitely check out the blog, baddinnerguest.blogspot.com. Other than that, we can just get right into this here. Do you, so where we left off was Genesis 4, obviously, because we're starting on 5. And Genesis 4 was, do you have any, rough notes for what was going on in Genesis 4?
When we last left our heroes, chapter 4 was Cain and Abel. Just for anyone who missed it, if you're starting off on this episode, which is a pretty familiar story. So, but kind of where we ended was Seth was born to replace Abel, and it started to go into the listing off of different names of generations of the family. And that is what we are going to be segueing into in this chapter. Okay. So,
is that the same chapter that Cain killed his brother, or was that the chapter prior?
No, it was that happened last chapter.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Right on. I'm sorry. I needed more catching up there than probably anybody listening. So I guess I'll just start off. So Genesis 5. This is the book of the generations of Adam. And the day that God created man, in the likeness of God made he him. Male and female created he them, and blessed them, and called their name Adam, in the day when they were created. So we were always kind of wondering who named him. I remember you asking that at least. Who named him? Who picked that? We finally find out it was God.
Well, it says it's just to interject quickly. It says in chapter 2 that Adam named, or maybe it was chapter 3. That Adam named Eve, but so that's that part.
Just Adam, you were wondering how he got his name?
Yeah, I suppose.
I forget what that was about. Maybe I'm completely off there. I apologize, but in that case, we're just reaffirming what we already knew. But it's interesting that they called their name Adam. So as a group or a species, they were Adam.
Yeah, that is an interesting part. Like, was that their last name? So was Adam's name Adam? And then we had Seth Adam.
Maybe it's even broader than last name.
Enos Adam.
Maybe that was Neanderthal. I don't know. All right, 5:3. And Adam lived in 130 years and begat a son in his own likeness and after his image, and called his name Seth.
So 130 years old, Adam had Seth. Well, Eve had Seth, but
Adam's still given a lot of credit here.
Yeah. Adam helped produce Seth at 130 years, which is longer than the vast majority. I think it's very rare to see someone live over 100, even 100 years, but let alone to get to 130 and still be. Yeah. So we'll see a lot of that, and that'll be something I'll hold off on for now, but definitely a discussion worth having as to why were they living so much longer than we are.
Okay. Yeah, no. And it's not even like he was on his deathbed at 130 years. He's having a son.
Oh,
That's some vitality. They didn't have Viagra back then.
Yeah.
They didn't have nothing. Nothing like, well, so maybe they ground up some bullhorn or something. 5:4. And the days of Adam after he had begotten Seth were 800 years, and he begat sons and daughters. And all the days that Adam lived were 930 years, and he died. Well, that was abrupt. That was
And he died of natural causes.
at 930 years. That's the cancer. That's the crop dusting they're doing. The vape chemtrails.
Chemtrails.
That's what's done it. Because that's almost, we could just call that 1,000 years and we wouldn't really be overshooting it.
Yeah, that's
Nobody would claim that we were like being blasphemous.
right. It's insane. Almost 1,000 years, and today we can't crack triple digits. So yeah, it's interesting to think about what happened in that time.
It's 2010 now. What was happening 1,000 years ago? Were we in the Bronze Age? No, we were.
I don't know. Well, this
either way,
not a good question to ask. We don't have resources right now.
Going to look really stupid right here, but just imagine how far backward we were 200 years ago. We still had slaves. You go back 400 years ago, and Europe's in tribes essentially. I mean, warlords, feudalism, what have you. So to think 1,000 years happened, like what had to have happened in that time frame across Earth or whatever region they were in 1,000 years, the crazy change that would have taken place just on the time scale alone.
Yeah, and it couldn't have been just the knowledge of good and evil, because that has been well established. That happened almost 1,000 years before Adam died. So it wasn't, because I mentioned that because I'm sure there were people out there listening who thought, well, yeah, it was because, we have this knowledge of good and evil and all that, we're mortal now. So it's like, well, that had happened already. And as we will continue to see, as we go down this long list of just people being listed that were born and how long they live, and it sort of makes you see the massive jump, but still at the same time you do see a consistency of 800 to 900 years per lifespan, and then it, with no explanation really, we drop down to 60, and to where now we're talking about in the modern age having some of the longest lifespans around, but we're still only getting people to around 80, 90.
Yeah.
What?
I mean, they had to raise the age of Social Security because of it, so.
So yeah, I mean we're making progress as far as modern standards go, but it's like you look at still we're
1,000 years. Are you shitting me?
Yeah, it's like we're not even close.
That's how they could build the pyramids. They lived 1,000 years. You could do a lot of shit in 1,000 years if you set your mind to it.
I suppose you could.
I feel like you could invent the cell phone in 1,000 years. Maybe. Maybe Adam just wasn't on top of his game. Do you want to pick up where I left off there at 5?
Yeah, so we're at 5 was, and all the days that Adam lived were 930 years, and he died. 6, and Seth lived 105 years and begat Enos. And Seth lived after he begat Enos 807 years and begat sons and daughters.
So that's roughly another 1,000 years there, right?
Yeah, we're getting up there on Seth, because he had already lived 105 years before he begat Enos. So yeah, he's up.
911?
He's past 1,000 at that point. Oh no, wait, and all the days were 912. So yeah, he died at 912, but still. So to verse 9, and Enos lived 90 years and begat Canaan. So there we go again at 90, being a dad. And Enos lived after he begat Canaan 815 years and begat sons and daughters. And all of the days of Enos were 905 years, and he died. So we see it we do see it immediately that everyone is living shorter, and it seems to be by generation a good. Is this
Are they having?
Is this just a
their
product
kids
of
a little
inbreeding?
earlier?
And they're having their kids a little earlier. Yes.
So 130 for Adam, 105 for Seth, and then Enos at 90.
90, yeah, and then again it goes from
just a
what?
little shorter and a little shorter.
And the lifespan goes from 930 to 912 to 905. And so yeah, we see that, and then we'll see it again here at 12. And Canaan lived 70 years and begat Mahalalel. And Canaan lived after he begat Mahalalel 840 years and begat sons and daughters. And all of the days of Canaan were 910 years, and he died. Well, okay, so he gets it back up to 910. But yeah,
He was a
so
good guy, Canaan. He's a real
yeah,
good guy. Ate a lot of honey.
a lot different than his namesake. And Mahalaleel lived 60 and 5 years and begat Jared. That's we made a big jump down there too. Jared is the first that we've seen. Well, I guess Adam, obviously, but we had a lot of no longer modern names, and then Jared slips in. So that's interesting. So at 16, and Mahalaleel lived after he begat Jared 830 years and begat sons and daughters. And all the days of Mahalaleel were 895 years, and he died.
So how many centuries are we at now? Like 3 centuries? Wait, is a century 1,000 years? Jesus Christ, that's a millennium.
A century would be 100.
Yeah.
So yeah,
How
we
many
are.
millennium are we at?
We should.
We should have done that math. I'm sorry, folks, for all the listeners there, but I feel like we're at 3 or 4 millennia. If Moses is at 900, and then Enos is at roughly 900, and Canaan's roughly at 900. If you round them all to 900.
I forgot Seth. So if we just want to round up to 1,000 for each to make this easy, Adam, Seth, Enos, Canaan, and then Mahalaleel, and then we're into Jared, and Jared's going to live to be 960. And then all of a sudden we get to Enoch. So right there we were at five millennia, and then Enoch is where we get the big jump because he only lives to be 360. And so things begin. So yeah, well, to split the gap there, because we rounded up on all of them, let's say at least 4.
Yeah.
And just leave it at that. But yeah, that's very interesting. And again, it's sort of, if you want to here's where I want to take a second to throw out, like, it's just odd. What is the point of this?
Just to argue with our own math there, these people were born before the other ones died, so it's not actually, it's a lifespan of maybe close to 4 millennia.
That's very true.
There's steps on top of each other
And
by about 100 years.
And they're actually only every 100 years.
So this was basically a couple millennia.
Yeah, that's a great point. I'm glad you caught that. But so yeah, I just
to catch us up, I think, to get back to what's the point, like you asked, I think this is to catch people up to, hey, how did we get here? Well, this is how. This is where you are. Work.
Yeah, exactly.
How much background knowledge do you need?
To what you said. Well, it just it almost makes me want to question it a little bit because you get nothing in the way of detail. And again, to your point, like, yeah, it's.
I just don't think their quality of life was high enough to care. I think you have to be to a certain quality of life before you care too much about the history of where you happened before you.
But what if you're taking this at face value? If Moses wrote this, like, I just don't understand. Like, he wouldn't. He wrote it through God, right? So he just chose to just skim and be like, you guys don't need these details.
I would assume
that's the part that bothers me.
Yeah.
Is sort of like, why are we just skimming through stuff? Like, why is the point to get you caught up quickly? If this is God's word and He wants you to have this knowledge, what's the point of skimming through to get you caught up to the present day? It makes sense to me to catch you up to the present day if smart people wrote this to control dumb people. Don't get offended by that. I'm talking about thousands and thousands of years ago when reading and writing was considered spellcraft.
Yeah.
So I just had to point that out there. Like, that's one of the parts that, like, concerns me and that I pull into question here, because I'm like, well, am I making sense on why this trouble? I don't know, trouble's not the right word.
A little bit. I think we just come from 2 different schools of thought with it. I think you would go. I think the point of this and all of these books was to teach you how to live your life, not so much how everybody had lived theirs before you, because that's what these are about, is the meaning of life. So they don't really need to tell you a whole lot about other people, because they're going to get to the rules and then they're going to get to the stories that show how powerful God is and those kind of things, which are a bit more important. And then Moses, I don't know if we find out that he was writing this since a certain time period or if this was all handed to him in Exodus. I really don't remember how this works out. So I don't know if this was stream of conscious from Moses onto tablet or what it was.
It just, yeah, fair enough. We'll have to move on, I guess, at some point. It doesn't make sense to me. This, and then, uh, when you compare the two testaments, it just doesn't make sense to me that the message was coming from essentially the same source. It's like well, I guess Jesus was the Messiah, and I'm getting way ahead of myself here. Well, we have plenty of time to get to the New Testament, but it's like in the Old Testament, detail is not important, and in the New Testament, it's like all a span of 3 years or something, and it's just like every detail about that, and it just.
I mean, they highlight the early years of Jesus' life and parts of it.
But there's like eight. There's a good grouping of years where he's missing.
Oh, okay.
And then they just jump to the 28 maybe,
okay.
I think. So yeah, you do get the early stuff, and then you jump, and then you get more details. But it's just, this is weird to me because on one hand I'm like, this is a lot of time. This is a lot of time to take just listing off. Like it seems like a nice boring chapter to almost skip through.
Yeah.
Like nothing to see here. And then, but you don't get sort of any detail as to like why were people dying,
right?
You know, like what was it was just a knowledge of good and evil meant that they don't take any time to explain death to you, or anything like that. It's just like this person lived 90. You know what I mean? They explain creation and they explain that you were supposed to be eternal.
It's a pretty
and again, yeah. So far, yeah, we might get to it. I'm just.
Because that's, to me, what like the reason all of these books ruminate through history is because to a lot of people they are the meaning of all of those questions you just asked, even with this like short-sighted history to it. So some of those things must be in there if you read it in at least the right context, but that's one of the reasons these things have stuck around so long. I mean, millions of people follow them. Maybe we'll find out they're only following it by quotes. I don't know, but even then, like there's apparently little, and not all of that comes from. There's a book of love poems in the Old Testament that we're going to get to. There's some crazy stuff in there. So I don't know. I think we'll get to some of that, and maybe you won't worry so much about the history because you'll be like, oh, or maybe not. I could be wrong.
Spoiler alert, we're going to be bringing a guest to read love poems because Bible or no Bible, I'm not reading love poems out loud on air.
God damn it.
Oh, you can't say that? Like Jesus, the one thing you can't say, man.
Yeah, I know.
My Atlanta. Oh.
Where did we leave off?
We should probably just start back with Jared. Just get a quick refresher.
Jared.
That would be 18. If you want, yeah.
Oh, you want me to? Okay.
Yeah, if you and I'll
Genesis 5:18. And Jared lived in 162 years, and he begat Enoch. And Jared lived after he begat Enoch 800 years, and begat sons and daughters. And all the days of Jared were 962 years, and he died. And Enoch lived 65 years, and begat Methuselah. And Enoch walked with God after he begat Methuselah 300 years, and begat sons and daughters. And all the days of Enoch were 365 years. And Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. And he was not what? 24.
Not it.
And Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him.
I believe what they are saying is that that Enoch or Enoch, I'm not sure, that he did not die and that he was taken up to God.
Oh.
Which explains his 365-year lifespan.
And it doesn't say he died.
So, fun with coincidence theory here. I just think it's interesting that Enoch lived the same number, 365, the same number of days per year.
Oh, okay.
I think that's just a fun little coincidence there for you. I did say we'd point out anything and everything we find.
Yeah, that is interesting. I didn't even notice that.
So yeah, he lived 365 years, was taken up to God, and I want to point out and mention that if you are someone who has heard of the sea scrolls, or are you know?
I've heard mention.
there's one of the so-called or alleged missing books of the Bible is the Book of Enoch.
Okay.
And so there are certain sects that would be something I would love to bring into as maybe a side issue,
Maybe before we
Genesis
do the New Testament.
5.1 or something,
Yeah.
and look more into the Book of Enoch because I believe it's called the Elder Sea Scrolls, something like that. That makes me think. I feel like I'm mixing up Old Testament lore and an Xbox game when I say that. The whole Elder Scrolls thing has me thrown.
Okay, I got you.
But yeah. So anyway, I think it's interesting. Again, but I know I have to remind myself that there's a lot of book to get to here. Things will potentially be explained to me, but it's just what a way to just slide under the table that Enoch was taken up to heaven. He didn't die. Like
Right?
there's no need for us to know why.
It doesn't
Like
say
why
he
he
died.
was absolved of the death that everyone else has to
Yeah.
experience. Like that's just not an important
It
detail.
tells you when Jared dies. It tells you when Mahalalel dies. It tells you when Canaan dies, and it says he
It's
died.
going to tell you going forward.
But
It's going to tell you
Enoch-
when Lamech dies. It's going to tell you when
Ooh, you've been
Methuselah
there,
dies.
son. I hadn't been there yet. I didn't know. Spoiler alert.
Spoiler alerts, yeah.
But
I'm just saying it's going to
That's
continue to
crazy.
tell you when everyone else dies. And Enoch, and it just
Isn't
so happens.
So it took like 3 millennia for somebody to be able to walk with God instead of dying. Just rough off my head math. Probably isn't real numbers.
And
But
again,
close.
it doesn't tell us why he walked with God. It doesn't tell us what he like. Wouldn't that be a good point in time to discuss
Yeah.
what
I would
what
like to
happened
know.
there?
I would definitely like to know.
Yeah,
Hey, what'd you do with him?
yeah, hey God, why was Enoch
Oh, you
so
walked?
cool? How can I be
Where?
more like Enoch so I can walk with you? And how can I learn how to be, why is that just, again, swept under the rug? But maybe we'll see it. Maybe it was in the Book of Enoch. I don't know. Maybe that's just a myth. We'll have to find out.
Next time on? No. We're on, 25?
Yeah, okay. So I'll take it up from here for a little bit. And Methuselah, mainly just because I like to say Methuselah. Okay, 25. And Methuselah lived 187 years and begat Lamech. And Methuselah lived after he begat Lamech 782 years and begat sons and daughters. And all the days of Methuselah were 969 years, and he died. Giggity. And Lamech lived 182 years and begat a son. And he called his name Noah. What? Noah.
Some foreshadowing.
And he called his name Noah, saying, This same shall comfort us concerning our work and toil of our hands, because of the ground which the Lord hath cursed. And I'm going to pause again.
Okay.
Because, so we're going to, they're going to tell us we're going to find out why Noah is so important.
Mm-hmm.
But it just makes me wonder why no one else was important. And this makes me wonder, why can't we know why Enoch was named Enoch? And Enoch was so cool, he got to walk with God. Granted, Noah does some pretty cool things for the world, according to the story, and speaks with God, talks with God.
And Noah's like Enoch's great-great-great-great-grandson.
From Enoch to Methuselah, yeah.
So, to me, this almost sounds like...
No, great-grandson.
Great-grandson. It almost sounds like... What were the Roman gods that were like half god, half man? And as the god weakened in them as they bred out of it.
I'm
What
not.
is that? Demigods.
Yeah.
Demigods. Is that right? I don't know.
That
if
is
it's
that is a
Roman,
term. Yeah, it's
Okay.
probably what you're referring to.
Okay. Cool.
But
That to me, I don't know, because their lifespan's just getting a little bit less and less, and then specific characters being extra special for some reason. I don't know. It's just it might be a stretch.
But at least that story tells you why they're special. I really want to know what's up with Noah's great grandpa here, but I digress.
We'll get there one day.
And let's see, we were at I'll just reread 29 just to refresh everyone on 29. And he called his name Noah, saying, This same shall comfort us concerning our work and toil of our hands, because of the ground which the Lord hath cursed. Because I feel like we kind of got caught up on
Oh,
Noah
yeah.
being important, and I wanted to point that out. Because of the ground which the Lord hath cursed. So again, I just kind of leave it at that. After this, we go back to the census. So any thoughts that the whole curse part? I mean, obviously we know. I'm assuming the curse that's in reference is Adam and Eve, but I mean, or is it? I feel like we might, as they explain Noah's lifespan, they'll probably talk about, because at this point, this is the time where the world is pretty bad. Things are getting pretty icky.
But I think the world's getting icky because of the curse that the God put on it in the beginning of time, or beginning of Adam and Eve or whatever, where he cursed the earth and you were going to have to till it to grow crops. Like I remember them basically saying he put weeds in the ground, but basically made it hard for us to get stuff that we can actually use, and then you had to shepherd animals.
Doesn't the Old Testament God sometimes just feel like
A huge jerk?
a pissed off kid with a magnifying glass?
Just the biggest jerk ever. It really does.
It really kind of lends to that old sort of, at least I don't know enough about the Gnostics to
Yeah.
say that this is valid, but what I have heard is that the belief is that the god of earth is a material god, basically a bully, basically a kid with a magnifying glass. And when you think about where that Gnostic belief came from, it was at this point in time when the Old Testament was written. This was an early sect of Christianity that got beaten out by what is known today as Christianity. At one point in time, the Gnostic religion was competing with this Bible. Based off of this same Bible, there's a different interpretation that was competing with what we today believe, and their belief was that this God that we worship was actually like a bad guy, essentially, that wanted us to worship him and do things in his name rather than be. It's just interesting because when you read this stuff, I'm not saying that I agree with that by any, before I get death threats.
Yeah.
I just want to say in that time period, as you're reading, you can kind of see where they pulled that from.
It would be just as easy to agree with that from this as the opposite. I mean, the punishment of having to like go from living forever straight to your life now exists to where you can die, and now you have to till the ground and work your butt off, and nobody's naked anymore.
And then, and when you get to like the 10 Commandments of stuff, is like you can't worship anything above me. Just the idea of like the forced worship sort of thing. I get, it's sort of, I can see where they're going with stuff like that.
You could also see though, just worshiping things in general seems to be what brings cultures down and societies down, though, a lot of times.
Well, and that's kind of what I'm saying is like I can see their argument of like, any God that wants you to worship anything at all might not be the best guy. It's interesting.
But in that context, though, isn't it interesting that we are steered away from knowledge of good and evil as being like pure? So basically, innocence is purity, and how true that really is, though. Like just in modern, like in real life, that's a thing.
Yeah, it's like sort of like the idea that if a child was born and just secluded somehow from society completely, that it wouldn't end up
with unlimited access to resources.
Yeah, well, of course, yeah, because it would
you're gonna kill something.
Yeah, exactly. But just sort of the idea that you're not born any certain way. You sort of just you just But again, that's not gonna.
And that's kind of
hold
like
true here.
Sounds like the awakening of consciousness to me more too, because I've heard other theories where like the Bible's really stories about how a consciousness awoke inside man, and that like before when like we knew like before we had knowledge of ourselves, we didn't have knowledge of good or bad. We just had knowledge of doing whatever we're going to do. Like if you killed something, you didn't feel guilty about it. If you stole something, you didn't feel guilty about it. You live in the laws of nature.
Yeah.
But this here is kind of establishing that there's rules higher than the laws of nature, and you're awoke to it, and suddenly you live in this land that's really scary. But if you would have just stayed innocent to it, it was a garden that like everything just grew for you, but you had to go on the outside and see what the violence was like and everything else was like. So like the worship of this idea of like returning to that innocence and purity. I mean, it's obviously used for war. We see it used for war, but you could see argument to the contrary, that it's really trying to steer you toward being pious because it's better than the alternative. because there is a lot of charity in this, and don't get me wrong, women are traded and slaves are owned, but slavery is different than what we think of it in the African context in a lot of these cultures, and in some of them it's bad, but in some of them it's not as bad. And I'm not saying any slavery is good. I'm a libertarian, but every time we see the word slave, I mean, we're a slave now in our society. Like it or not, you have a tax bill at the end of the day. It is what it is. If you work, you owe money. If you want to live somewhere, you owe somebody money. So it's no big difference to me when they reference slavery here, and you could still have those concepts to me of trying to strive for that purity. And what are the 10 Commandments other than don't worship gods and keep a day holy? Like,
don't think bad thoughts about your neighbor's wife.
Yeah, which
like
is a good idea.
I mean,
they're all good ideas.
It's a good idea, but also like the difference between like thought and action are huge. So the idea that you shouldn't think a thought, like you're being taught that that your human nature essentially that
don't think about it. I thought it said doesn't. We'll get there. We'll get to Exodus eventually. We should definitely finish this chapter. But
I can't wait.
I'm wondering if it says don't think or just don't do, and if it's the church that spun don't think into it, because I don't know them off the top of my head.
And it's just other stuff. I think the word is covet. The word is thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife or something like that. Which to me, we can Google it, but I believe it's more closer to yearn than it is like.
I can choose not to yearn.
It's not like it doesn't say thou shalt not lay, which that I can I guess again if marriage is
I'm saying like covet to me is still a choice. Like that implies like consistent, repetitive, exploratory thought. And I'm here to say that, like, if you just think about sleeping with your best friend's girlfriend and then you're like, probably shouldn't think about that anymore, you're a lot better off than imagining it in your head.
I mean, yeah, that's fair.
So I'm not saying don't ever. But it's not saying.
I don't think you should go to hell for it.
Yeah, no, I don't either.
If
but
you
that's
don't act,
yeah.
If you have what's the difference to having a crush on Mila Kunis and fantasizing about or Jennifer Aniston? That person is married.
Oh,
They may not be your neighbor,
right? I'm not disagreeing.
So I'm just making I'm just trying to point something out here like that. I don't. I think the difference between thought and action is what makes you who you are. Is the closest thing you have to control or any sort of freedom is the fact that you can't control your thoughts, but you have some control over how you decide to act.
Right.
So it'll be interesting to see that, because I don't think there should be sort of like any thought crimes or any thought sins.
No doubt.
I mean,
yeah.
Especially think about people with like microaggressions or stuff like that, where they just let off little bits of steam at a time. It's like, shit, man, if you were held accountable for every thought, like that sin count would never end.
No, never. You're 100% accurate there. I just at a certain, and I'm not. This isn't even disagreement with what you're saying. At a certain point, a thought becomes a decision that you're making that thought.
And
that's when the coveting would start over the thought. You know what I mean?
No, that's fair. Yeah.
But don't get me started on microaggressions, please. This chapter finishes really dully. We should probably just finish it off here. Were we at 30? Yeah, we never made it past you repeating 29.
Yep. Well, we're trying to make it interesting here. I mean,
I'm not dogging us on air. I'm dogging us.
Just for the people that are wondering, we don't normally stop this often for lengthy sidebars, but not every chapter is us just listing off who was born and how long they lived. So, in an effort to not put you to sleep, if you'd like us to put you to sleep, comment below, and we'd gladly make a nighttime version where we just read this one straight through, so you can be asleep in 7 minutes. But so on to 30. And Lamech lived after he begat Noah 595 years. And begat sons and daughters. And all the days of Lamech were 770 and 7 years, and he died. Wow, there's 777.
That's where it comes from, I guess.
Lucky guy. 32. And Noah was 500 years old, and Noah begat Shem, Ham, and Japheth. So also Noah's the only one worthwhile noting multiple sons. I think that's interesting because begat sons and daughters is listed almost every time. They there's a pattern of showing you firstborn, and that's it. And then, oh yeah, there's these other ones. And so Noah has the 3 sons. Clearly it's because, obviously I know it's because we're about to go into some more detail, and Noah's about to be the prevalent character here.
I'm sorry.
But, so that is how it ends, and obviously little preview. We all know what's coming here. We know that the flood is fast upon us, and we're going to figure out what Noah did. And this next one should be interesting because of course I have some conspiracy theories for you guys that I'm going to be throwing out there about different ideas I've heard for what Noah's Ark was, what it could be, what it could represent. This will be finally we're back to a part where you could start discussing the idea of the Bible as, if it's an allegory, sort of some deeper meanings behind some stuff, because we're about to get one of the first major tales outside of creation. I don't know about you, RJ. I'm excited for it.
I definitely was. I thought tonight was the night that we were going to end up getting into it, but I didn't look ahead enough apparently. So I was kind of sad that tonight was not the night that started, because I knew it was very interesting. I didn't realize they had this entire chapter of just, this is who birthed this person, and it's still, again, just that firstborn, and then, there was some others in firstborn. So it was just, it was really dull, and I'm really looking forward to Noah's Ark, because you have the aliens, you have the fact that, and you have the aliens, but no, you have that, like, entire aspect to it that a lot of people know. You have, like, every culture and society and religion having a great flood. You have a layer of silt around the earth. You have these civilizations that we find that are, like, underwater, or not civilizations, but old cities, you would call them, like, past civilizations. So it's really going to be kind of interesting, and I feel like we all hear this story a bunch, so loosely going to know what's going on, but it seems to be every time we know loosely what's going on, we read it, and there's a lot more little details that they kind of skimped over. So basically, what do you remember of Noah's Ark? Because I just remember he was told there was going to be a flood. He told everybody. Nobody believed him. He said, "Sons, I need you to help me build an ark." His sons all helped him build an ark. He gets 2 of every animal onto the ark. It floods for a very long time. Dove brings back an olive branch. That's how he knows land is, like, coming back and the water's receding. Rainbow shows that God will never flood the entire planet again. Am I?
That's about as much. Broad strokes, yeah. That's about it. The only thing I would add would be
episode, folks.
The corruptness of the world at that time, which will be interesting because that's what we're getting into with our next chapter. It's going to be the description of why things are so bad, and it'll be an interesting topic because there are those that believe, again, when you play into the allegory things, there are some out there that believe that we live in the time of Noah. And that or we live in something that's parallel to the time of Noah, and that it won't be
the new Noah.
Maybe I don't know. I can only say for sure that I know who Noah is not, and that would be me, because that's the only thing I could prove. I am not the next Noah, so we can start by scratching that name off the list and work our way from there. But the sort of idea being, I guess, that, but again, it's good to remember that the end of the world has been predicted since the beginning of the world, so naturally you have to weigh that against the people that claim that we are currently living in, the parallel to the times of Noah, and that is there going to be some sort of, that puts us close to the revelation, and we'll have to get all the way through the book and read things for ourselves to figure out if there's anything there, but I am interested to see what made the world so awful that God decided to flood it, and see, what we think, how we think we fare at this point. And then 7 will be more. 7 will be more of the story of the flood, and then the end of it. We'll see how right we're at the, because that's what I can't remember is like. Sort of the epilogue, not the prologue. I can't remember the epilogue of Noah's Ark. Like, well, so everything was cool with the boat, and then you just like open the boat up, but how did what you just had you had two of every animal all in the same place.
Yeah, duh.
Of course the anti I was going to say Bibleist people, the atheist, I guess that's the term. There's a term for it, Kevin. Just use that one. The atheist would say, how did the penguins get on the ark? Like, what's the deal with the randomness of all these animals? So hopefully some of that gets
Noah
mentioned
had his magic down.
and not skirted under the rug like Enoch. I'd never forget.
So if you had to place bets, is it going to get skirted over or not? Because I'm going to say it's going to get skirted over.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
I think so.
Just wondered. Hopefully not. It did in my education of it, that's for sure.
Which again is why we do this. At the very least, you'll be able to read it for yourself or hear it, albeit slowly. Especially they're normally faster than this. This one was rough.
Honestly, we're only at 40 minutes. Last one was an hour. We're good.
Oh yeah, I guess technically this is still a quick one.
Yeah.
But
lots of numbers, years on years. But do you have any final thoughts? I feel like we can wrap up on that note.
No, I look forward to the next episode. We'll have one out for you guys in a couple of days.
Yeah, I can't wait. Check us out at Bad Dinner Guests on the Twitter. S at the end of that. baddinnerguests.blogspot.com. Message us on Facebook. Get a hold of us. Comment. Let us know what you think. And if we get something really wrong, we definitely want to know about that. If you're a pastor or something like that and you know something we don't know, fill us in. Thanks, guys.